I've never been the type of person who scares easily. I used to travel a lot for work, staying at random roadside motels when I couldn't make it home in time. But one night in 2017, something happened at a small motel in rural Nevada that changed the way I look at being alone forever. It was close to midnight. I'd been driving from Reno to Salt Lake City for hours and was completely exhausted. My GPS showed a small motel about 10 miles ahead, so I figured I'd stop for the night. When I pulled in, I saw an old, flickering neon sign that said Pine Haven Motel. The parking lot was empty except for one old red pickup truck. The place looked run down, but I didn't care. I just needed a bed. When I walked into the lobby, there was no one at the front desk, just a small bell sitting there. I rang it twice before an older man appeared from a door in the back. He didn't say much. He slid a key across the counter and said in a dry voice, "Room 6. Cash only." I handed him $40, took the key, and went to my room. The room smelled like cigarettes and mildew. The carpet was stained and the wallpaper was peeling. But I was too tired to care. I locked the door, dropped my bag, and lay down on the bed. That's when I heard it, a slow, repetitive tapping sound coming from the wall behind the headboard. Tap, tap, tap. First, I thought it might be pipes, or maybe the building settling. But after a few minutes, I realized it was too steady, too human. I leaned closer and froze. I could hear something faint, like breathing. Someone was on the other side of that wall. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was just imagining it because I was tired. I turned off the lamp and closed my eyes. But around 2:30 in the morning, I woke up again, this time to the sound of a door creaking open. I sat up in bed and listened. Then I heard it, slow footsteps coming down the hallway outside my room. They stopped right at my door. My heart started pounding. Then came another sound, something heavy being dragged across the carpet. It was faint, but I could hear it clearly in the silence. I picked up my phone and turned on the flashlight, aiming it toward the bottom of the door. I could see the shadow of 2 feet just standing there. "Who's there?" I whispered. No answer. Then I heard a voice, soft and slow, from the other side of the door. "You shouldn't be here." My blood ran cold. Every hair on my body stood up. I jumped out of bed and ran to the window, trying to open it, but it was stuck shut. Then I heard the doorknob turning slowly. Whoever was outside was trying to get in. I didn't wait. I grabbed my car keys, shoved my phone in my pocket, and sprinted out of the room. The hallway was empty. I ran straight through the lobby, but all the lights were off now. The man at the front desk was gone. The red pickup truck outside was gone too. I jumped in my car and floored it out of the parking lot without looking back. After driving for about half an hour, I stopped at a gas station to calm down. I told the clerk what happened, and when I mentioned the name Pine Haven Motel, his expression changed. He said quietly, "You said Pine Haven? That place burned down about 10 years ago. Nobody's been there since." I didn't believe him. The place I'd just stayed at looked old, but it was definitely standing. The next day, I drove back just to see for myself. And that's when I realized he was right. The motel was nothing more than a blackened, burned-out shell. The sign was melted and broken. The windows were gone. The rooms were completely gutted. The only thing left was a crumbling door lying on the ground, and on it, barely visible through the soot, was the number 6. I used to live in a small apartment complex in Portland when I was in my mid-20s. It was cheap, quiet, and close to where I worked. The kind of place where everyone pretty much kept to themselves. I didn't know most of my neighbors, but that never really bothered me until I met the guy next door that he moved in sometime around late fall. I remember because the air was already cold and the trees out front were losing their leaves. The first time I saw him, he was standing in the hallway outside his apartment, staring at the floor. I said, "Hey, how's it going?" But he didn't even look at me. He just turned his key, went inside, and shut the door. It was strange, but I figured maybe he was just shy or had a bad day. Over the next few weeks, I'd occasionally hear noises coming from his apartment late at night, like faint thuds or the sound of furniture scraping across the floor. Once, around 3 a.m., I woke up to what sounded like whispering through the vent that connected our bedrooms. I pressed my ear against the wall, but couldn't make out any words, just soft murmuring. After that, I started keeping my TV on while I slept. It made me feel less alone. A few days later, I came home from work and saw my neighbor standing in the hallway again. This time, he was holding something, a small box, maybe the size of a shoebox. He was staring at it like it was alive. I said hello again, trying to be friendly, but he didn't respond. He slowly turned and went back into his apartment. I remember thinking he looked pale, sick, even. That night, I heard something fall in his apartment. A loud crash, followed by silence. I knocked on the wall to check if he was okay, but there was no answer. I almost called the landlord, but I told myself it wasn't my business. The next morning, I noticed a weird smell in the hallway. It was faint, like spoiled food or something dead. I assumed it was trash and didn't think much of it. But the smell got stronger each day. After about 4 days, it became unbearable. I finally decided to tell the building manager that. He came by later that afternoon, knocked on the neighbor's door a few times, then pulled out a spare key. I stood in the hallway, watching as he unlocked the door. The moment it opened, the smell hit us both like a wall. It was thick, rotten air that made my stomach twist. The manager turned to me and said, "Stay here," before stepping inside. Not even 30 seconds later, he came rushing back out, his face white as chalk. He called 911 immediately. When the police arrived, they taped off the hallway and told everyone to stay in their apartments. I could hear them talking outside for hours, but no one told us anything. Later that evening, I saw them wheel out a black body bag. The next day, a detective knocked on my door. He asked me how well I knew my neighbor. I told him I didn't, just that the guy never talked and always kept to himself. The detective sighed and said quietly he'd been dead for at least a week. I froze. A week? But I heard him moving around just a few nights ago. The detective stared at me for a second before replying, "That's not possible." That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying everything. The noises, the smell, the whispers through the vent. Around 2 a.m., I sat up in bed and stared at the wall that separated our bedrooms. Then I heard it again. The whispering, very faint, but there, coming from the same vent between our rooms. My heart was pounding as I leaned closer. I could almost make out words this time. "It was my name," whispered slowly. Over and over again. I jumped out of bed, turned on every light, and sat in the corner of my room with my phone in my hand until the sun came up. The next morning, I packed a bag and went to stay with my sister. A few weeks later, when I went back to get the rest of my stuff, the apartment was quiet. The air was stale. But as I was packing, I noticed something strange. The vent between our bedrooms had been sealed shut from his side. Not screwed in. Sealed with duct tape from the inside of his room, which means if I heard whispering through that vent after he was dead, it couldn't have been him. I moved out that same day. And to this day, whenever I stay somewhere new, I make sure there's no vent connecting my room to anyone else's. When I was 19, I rented a small house outside Columbus, Ohio. It wasn't much, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and an old basement that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. The landlord told me, "Don't worry about the basement. It's just storage. Keep it locked if you want." I didn't think much of it. The rent was cheap, the neighborhood was quiet, and I liked having a place to myself. The basement door was right next to the kitchen. It was one of those old, creaky wooden doors with a rusty handle and a heavy lock on it. Every time I walked past it, I felt this weird chill, like something cold leaked through the cracks. The first night, I unpacked everything and went to bed early. Around 2:30 a.m., I woke up because I heard a soft thud coming from downstairs. It wasn't loud, just like something had dropped on the kitchen floor. I figured maybe a pot had slipped or a mouse was scurrying around. I tried to go back to sleep. Then I heard it again. Thud, followed by a faint dragging noise that I got up, grabbed my phone flashlight, and tiptoed to the kitchen. The room was empty, but the sound was definitely coming from behind the basement door. I stood there for a moment, staring at it. Then I did what every dumb horror movie character does. I turned the handle that IT didn't move. Locked tight. I sighed in relief and went back to bed. The next morning, I told myself it was probably the old house settling, or maybe raccoons under the floorboards. But that night, around the same time, the noises came back. Thud, drag, then silence that I couldn't shake the feeling that something was down there. I texted my landlord the next day and asked if he'd been keeping anything in the basement. He replied, "Not since the last tenant. The key should be in the top drawer by the sink if you ever need to check it." That night, I decided I'd finally open IT around 11 p.m. I turned off all the lights except one in the hallway. I grabbed the key from the drawer, took a deep breath, and unlocked the basement door. The lock made a loud click that echoed in the silence. I slowly pulled the door open, and a thick wave of cold, damp air hit my face. The stairs creaked under my feet as I went down. The flashlight's beam barely reached the bottom. Cobwebs everywhere, dust floating in the air. At the far end of the basement, I saw a large wooden crate. It looked old, like something out of the 1950s. I walked closer, but before I reached it, something moved in the shadows. A low shuffle, then a faint whisper. So soft I thought I imagined it. "Don't." I froze. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt that I turned and bolted up the stairs, slammed the basement door shut, and locked it. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, I told myself again it was just my imagination. Maybe the wind, maybe my mind playing tricks. But later that day, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The basement door was slightly open. Not much, just enough that I could see the dark gap where I'd locked it the night before. I knew for a fact I'd turned the lock. I always double-checked that I slammed it shut again and pushed a chair against it. That night, I called my friend Mark and asked him to come over and stay the night. He laughed it off at first, but agreed that we were sitting in the living room around midnight, playing games, when we heard it. 3 slow knocks from the basement door. Knock, knock, knock. Mark muted the TV, staring at me. "Was that you?" he asked. That I shook my head. The knocks came again, this time harder. That he grabbed a kitchen knife. I grabbed the flashlight. We approached the door slowly. I called out, "Hello? Who's there?" Silence. Mark leaned in, pressed his ear to the door, and whispered, "I think I hear breathing." Before I could say anything, something banged hard from the other side. The door shook violently. We both jumped back. Mark yelled, "Dude, we're calling the cops." We ran outside and waited in his car until the police arrived. 2 officers came, checked the whole house, and even went down to the basement. When they came back up, one of them said, "There's nothing down there, just an old box and a few tools." I tried to explain what we'd heard, but they clearly didn't believe us. After they left, Mark decided to crash at his place. I was alone again. That night, I slept with every light on. Around 3 a.m., I woke up again. My room was freezing cold. I could hear the same dragging noise, but this time, it wasn't from downstairs. That IT was coming from the hallway. I turned my head slowly toward my bedroom door. It was open just a crack, and through it, I could see the basement door at the end of the hallway. Wide open, something was standing there. IT looked like a man, tall, hunched, wearing torn clothes covered in dirt. His face was pale, eyes sunken deep into his skull. He was holding something, a small wooden box, the same one I'd seen in the basement. That he whispered something I couldn't hear and began walking toward me. His footsteps were slow, dragging, like his legs barely worked. That I couldn't move, couldn't scream. Just as he reached my door, the light flickered, and he was gone. The door was closed again. That I don't remember much after that. I woke up on the floor the next morning, shaking. The basement door was locked once more, and the key was gone. I moved out that day. A week later, I got a call from my landlord. He sounded nervous. He said, "I found something in the basement while cleaning. An old crate. Inside it was a box with bones inside. Looked human." He paused for a moment, then asked, "Did you ever open that basement door?" I didn't answer. I just hung up. Now, years later, I still think about that night. About that voice whispering, "Don't." And every once in a while, when I'm up late and it's quiet, I swear I can still hear that same slow knocking sound.